And welcome to another cracking, whip-snapping, fantastical episode of Heart of Poland, the show where we talk to fascinating people leading fascinating lives. And I have just spent 15 wonderful, magical moments with Magdalenda Foremska from the Polish Humanitarian Action. Hello, Magda.
Hello, thank you for having me.
You're kind of a refugee yourself from COVID, aren't you? Because you normally live and work in Warsaw, but because of remote working, you're actually in Wrocław at the moment.
Yeah, actually, it's my hometown, so it's good to be back. But yes, we are working remotely, so we can have this Warsaw-Wrocław connection right now.
And I was going to say, which is a better city?
I think in America, I'll take the fifth.
Now, Magda, you were explaining to me before this episode that you actually studied in New York City. You were studying classics and then you went on to international science. I just found it such an interesting story that I just wanted to talk about it, which is where you got your amazing English from. It's an American English.
I learned it in Poland. A lot of it I learned in Poland. In America, it was more sort of like a cultural accent flair, that sort of thing.
Well, you do speak absolutely fantastic English for an American person. Now, Magda, let's get it straight out of the way. What is Polish Humanitarian Action? Because I've heard about you guys for about a year, and I'm super impressed by what you do. And I think Polish people need to be impressed by what you guys do because it's the best of Poland, the best of Polish people. So to tell us in a nutshell, sell it to me. We're in a lift together.
So Polish Humanitarian Action is actually the biggest humanitarian organization in Poland. We were founded almost 28 years ago in December of 1992 by Janina Hojska, who heard, as most of the country, about terrible news coming from former Yugoslavia. It was during the war back then and the siege of Sarajevo. And she just felt so distraught and shocked by the news that she felt she had to do something. So she basically had this appeal to Polish people. You know, we have to do something. We have to help. And that's how the first convoys to Sarajevo were organized. They left on the 26th of December 1992. And that's what we treat as the inception date of our organization.
So Poland, I have to interrupt. So Poland literally only just recovering from decades of communist mismanagement, pretty badly organized and in a pretty terrible state. And Poles are already going out to help other people, including this fantastic lady as well, who I think it inspires you all in your daily life, doesn't she?
Of course, definitely. Yes.
I interrupted you. I'm so sorry.
So what do? We continue doing that. We provide help to people who need help. People from war zones or military conflicts, people from areas that were struck by natural disasters. We care about people and we want to elevate their suffering. That's the mission of our organization.
And everyone in the organization is Polish. I assume you also hire people locally to deliver projects on your behalf?
Of course. Actually, we have in our field offices, currently we have missions in South Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, Iraq, Ukraine. And we also do projects in Kenya. We hire a lot of local staff. Most of our employees are local staff because they understand the needs and they know language. They know the language. So yes, that's something that we take seriously.
Guys, I think we should all take a moment to shove some łapkis in w górę, as they say in Polish, some thumbs up and some hearts for Magda and her team of passionate people. Magda, I know you've had quite an interesting career. Maybe I'd like to talk to you about that in a second. But you're doing this out of love for your fellow human beings, which is a love, I think, which has united people in these difficult times. We'll probably talk about what you're doing to help other Polish people as well. When I say you, I mean you guys plurally.
Sure.
In Polish Humanitarian Action. But let's focus on these war-torn countries of extreme conflict, which unfortunately has carried on since Yugoslavia and brought horrible damage. But we're also talking about climate change as well. It's something we were talking about before. So take us through a typical project in one of the countries you mentioned.
Wow, there are so many and they're different. But basically, as PAH, Polish Humanitarian Organization, we specialize in so-called water and sanitation sector. We specialize in providing water to people in areas where the water is scarce. Remember, in Africa, it's the most precious commodity, water. So we build wells, shallow wells. We provide water via water trucking. We build latrines, hand washing facilities. We operate in, for example, rural areas in Somalia, very often ravaged and damaged by floods or droughts. That's one of the effects of climate change. And also in refugee camps for internally displaced people who had to flee their homes, leave their land behind because of the military conflict, or because of for example, a natural catastrophe like a flood or a drought. So we try to make sure that they have a place where they can wash their hands. They have latrines, they have showers. That those facilities are also gender oriented or proper for people with disabilities. This is what we specialize. This is what we specialize in. But for example, in Eastern Ukraine, we do work in the so-called protection sector. We work with people who have been living along the so-called contact lines in Eastern Ukraine, where, as we all know, although it's a little bit of a forgotten story, there's a military conflict going on. It's never ended. And every day there's an exchange of fire. And there's 3 million people living in these areas. Most of them are seniors. Very often they are ill and they need psychosocial help as well. So we provide a support of a psychologist. We create those safe spaces where people can meet, hang out. They have singing workshops, dancing workshops, art workshops. They can do something else other than thinking about the war, because let's be honest, a lot of them suffer from PTSD, which is understandable.
Absolutely. A hidden killer, a really, really terrible thing. And unfortunately, many people just do not understand what PTSD really means and can be. They think it's something that only affects soldiers. Absolutely not.
No.
Magda, we'll come back to Ukraine, but I wanted to touch on something which something I hear actually from people, not just in Poland, but generally when you talk about these countries. A comment actually which someone wrote to me a while back for a fundraiser I did for Sierra Leone, where the person said, "Why can't their government just help them?" Can you just break down how little support people get from governments and how little institutions are developed, or how underdeveloped they are compared to the kind that you and I would experience living in New York or in Poland or any other country in the West?
Well, we're talking about the places that are extremely, extremely poor. And as I said before, ravaged by conflicts, by wars, or by natural disasters. Very often, for example, in Somalia, there is a political instability or turmoil. In Yemen, there is a war going on. So it is impossible for the governments to have enough resources to provide such help. So people in these countries heavily relied on humanitarian aid coming from abroad. Just to a quick example. In Yemen, right now, there are more and more COVID confirmed cases being reported. Health experts estimate that it is possible that 70% out of 29 million population will get infected. There are 2 machines in the country. They do 4 tests for 1 million of the population. So this is the scale of poverty that we're talking about. Humanitarian aid is key to make sure that people don't die.
Where does this aid then come from then? Are you getting some enormous grant from the government, or is this coming from ordinary Polish people?
We have different sources of funding from institutions, Polish and international, from business donors. But our most basic and most appreciated source is just the general public, Polish people. who always respond generously whenever we ask them to, because this funding, the donations that we get from Poles, allow us to very quickly react when there is an emergency. For example, a few months ago, there was an emergency during a military offensive in northwestern Syria, in the province of Idlib. The lives of almost 3 billion people were in peril. Thanks to those funds, we were able to act quickly and provide help for those who, in freezing temperatures, because it was still winter, just had to flee their homes immediately. So yes, Polish people.
Yeah, Poles, I think you need to give yourself a slap on the back. But maybe it's time for a little bit of a CTA, Magda. What do you think? Should we encourage some people to visit the Polish Humanitarian Action website and maybe play their part?
Of course, always do that. We have a fantastic webpage. We are on Facebook in Polish and in English, so you don't have to learn Polish just to follow. Although, Patrick is a good example here that it is possible. We are on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, we are on YouTube. Of course, we are on Instagram. And what we take very seriously is sort of like informing the people about our activities. So what we do, where we are, how we help, who we help, what is the result of the help, because we want to be as transparent as possible. So if you want to know more about what we do, please visit any of these outlets. And of course, your donations will be greatly appreciated, because we actually intensified our activities in era of COVID-19. And we are working intensely in Africa and in Eastern Ukraine and Yemen that I mentioned before, to provide aid to as many people as possible, because we have to remember that prevention is the only way pretty much to save COVID in these high-risk places. Because when you are in a refugee camp, quarantine or self-isolation, it's impossible. It just doesn't exist, because all these camps are extremely overcrowded. Access to clean water is extremely difficult. So that's what we're dealing with as well, trying to increase the amount of water that a person can get, so they can really keep that hygiene routine. Soap is scarce, so we're trying to make sure that everybody has access to soap. But most important, we're educating people about what COVID-19 is, that it's not like a regular flu, that it can be, and it is really lethal, and it is vital that you keep your hygiene regimen and try to follow the rules. But also, it is very, very difficult because, for example, African governments where we work in Somalia and South Sudan, but the same thing in Iraq, for example, or in Yemen, when COVID reached these places, they pretty much did what everybody else did. They closed the borders, they imposed a curfew or self-isolation or quarantine. They want people to stay home. However, most of the people living in Africa, approximately 85%, they're employees of so-called informal economy. What is it? It's when you're self-employed or when you have odd jobs, irregular gigs. You go and you sell your vegetables or fruit on the market, or you do some kind of a service for somebody when they need you. So they face this really, really tragic choice. You can stay safe and stay home, but this way you don't provide for your family. Or you can go, keep working, but you risk being infected with COVID. So it's a truly tragic choice that millions and millions of people face.
Here we are on the internet, of course, so people just don't work like that in these countries. It's and of course, one person is often providing. The one person who works is often providing for several other people. Sure. I have friends in Africa exactly in that situation. The isolation is not good at all. Magda, have you been out to the countries you've mentioned? I mean, some of these places are quite dangerous, really, aren't they?
Well, we're trying to make sure that our employees and our beneficiaries are safe. So we follow really strict protocols, and luckily we haven't had a single incident in that regard. Yes, I was in Africa, but I visited and monitored our project in Kenya and in Djibouti. In Kenya, the project is a little different because it has to do with sustainable livelihood. It's more of a development project. It means that we are helping people living in areas that can be very affected by droughts to build sand dams. And it's a very simple technology, because you, of course, sand or sediment from a river, concrete and stones. And basically what it does is when you have a river, in that part of Africa, you have rainy season, dry season, rainy season, dry season, right? But because of the climate change, a rainy season has become shorter, and it was impossible to retain enough water for these communities living by that part of a river to go through a dry season, which was longer and longer and longer and longer, right? So they couldn't farm their fields, grow any kind of vegetables in the garden. They were faced with possible famine or malnutrition, not to mention waterborne disease. So when we built a dam like that, or rather those cooperations that participate in the projects because they do everything themselves, this way, on the one side of the river, during the rainy season, water gets stored in that sediment. And when the dry season comes, it is enough water for those people to continue water their fields or home gardens. And most importantly, in Africa, it is women who bring the water home. So they had to walk further and further and further, sometimes 10 kilometers one day, to bring 20 liters or so of water for the family. So they didn't have time pretty much for anything else, for cooking nutritious meals, taking care of the kids, taking care of themselves. So this brings incredible freedom. That's what I kept hearing from many women that I talked to them. Because we also provided them with classes about business management, bookkeeping, planning. So when they have their fields or gardens and they have a surplus, they can sell the vegetables or grain, and the income they can save for investing later. But also what I've heard from many of them, it is just an incredible perspective to be a mom, especially of girls, and to know that the girls won't have to walk for water anymore because it's there. So they have a choice to, stay at school, go to college, do whatever they dream of doing. So I have to say that's a pretty as I say, it is simple, concrete, sand, and stones, but it transforms the lives of entire communities on many levels. People.
And you went there. How long were you there for?
I spent a week in Kenya, and then I visited another project that we are doing in Djibouti.
Life-changing for you?
Yeah, because if you if you see this construction, and people are willing and very eager to talk to you, and they're telling you stories about their life 2 years ago and their life right now, and they're so happy and they determined to go further and to do more things, and they feel safe, and they see a bright future for their kids. It's not a bad day in the office. No, not at all.
That was a good New York ending there. Magda, you're English, by the way, guys. Give some thumbs up and hearts. You got people watching from Rome. You got people watching from the US. People watching from London right now. Ciao, London. All right, mate. US. I can't see which city. Magda, a little fun fact, by the way. My grandfather used to play tennis with Jomo Kenyatta. So there you go. Yeah.
So you have your own African connection there, yeah.
Exactly. I see you're also working with my old friend Yaroslav Kuzniar, who's done some awesome documentaries, for example, in Sudan. He visited
Somalia. He went with us to
Somalia.
Somalia. Yeah. And he produced an amazing documentary. I encourage you all to watch it, about different sides of Somalia. Contrast, because you have IDP camps and extreme poverty, but you also have social media influencers and people with big dreams and ideas. So if you have a moment, please watch it.
It shows, because I think there's, still in our minds, despite the fact we have access to a lot more information, you just have this idea that sadly, with many of these African countries, these people don't have technology or anything. It's now actually mobile banking in Africa was way ahead of European mobile banking, even 12, 13, 14 years ago when I first went. It's not that they don't have phones, it's that they don't have things that we take for granted, like water, toilets, and food and healthcare and all those other things. It's a different kind of poverty than the one we might have thought of 25, 30 years ago when you saw pictures of, unfortunately starving children with pot bellies and not very much else, which is a symptom. Well, I want to get bang ourselves on the back. I mean, is Polish Humanitarian Action a stellar example? Are we smaller now or bigger than any other sort of a comparative country? How many employees have you got? What kind of size of organization are we talking here?
I'd say that we're mid-size. If you count all our employees in our field offices, I think it's around 300 people. But we have a very good reputation that we pride ourselves in, because we also have international audits and internal audits. So there's the question of transparency. And we are actually quite appreciated in South Sudan and in Somalia. I told you that we work in the sanitation and water sector. So because of our expertise and sort of acknowledgement that we really know what we're doing, our organization has become one of the coordinators of that sector in South Sudan. So this is like a very big deal in the humanitarian world. But basically, it means that people trust us. And what we're doing is just good quality, and it really serves the purpose, because this is what this is all about: helping people to be able to have easier, better lives.
And I'm assuming it's also a little bit of good PR for Poland. I mean, let's talk about that. For example, when you're out in Kenya, do people even really know where Poland is?
In the north, very, very cold. It was actually it was quite funny, because we were there in December, which, like for us, it was incredible, wonderful weather around plus 24 Celsius. And for them, it's not so great. So I actually saw kids wearing sort of like winter hats. It's sort of like a fashion statement as well, or like sweaters. And people were surprised that, for example, I could wear a short sleeve. And when I asked about the temperature, they say, yeah, but right now it's a little chilly, because in the evening it's 15. And I said, no, this is not chilly. And they could not understand that you can have a sort of like a -0 temperature. It's a complete abstract. But they're extremely friendly. They're very open, and they know that it's quite a distance. We are far away. But for example, in Djibouti, I had a conversation about political situation in Poland, France, and Djibouti with a very knowledgeable taxi driver who knew, names of politicians and historical facts. It was very impressive, I have to say.
Wow. Okay. It sounds like an interesting taxi driver. That's absolutely fantastic. Magda, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing in Poland, because we talked about coronavirus. We talked a lot about climate. We talked a little bit about Ukraine. Maybe we can come back to that in a second. But how is Polish Humanitarian Action helping Polish people? Because you've got this great campaign which you relaunched. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, in Poland, we concentrate on sort of like one activity. We call it pajacyk jumping jack. loose translation in English. And basically, for the past 22 years, we've been providing hot meals for kids who are at a risk of social alienation due to poverty, disease, a special family situation, disability. So we try to make sure that they get a hot, nutritious meal. It's usually done in schools or in social daycare centers. But because, as we know, COVID locked down everything, we didn't want to leave these kids behind. And we came up with a different way of providing good, nutritious food to them. So we basically organized packages full of necessary, solid foods, and together with our local partners across the entire country, very often with help of firefighters, nuns, sometimes employees of local fitness centers. We made sure that these packages reached the families in need before Easter. It was very important to us. So we distributed, I think, over 800. And 2 days ago, we launched a second edition. This time is going to be more than 900. Also around the entire country. Today we are in the city of Kielce. So that's our, and we call it a pajacek or jumping jack nonstop, meaning that despite COVID, no matter what, we continue doing, because no kid in this country should go hungry.
Amen to that, man. And if it means a nun on a run with a lunchbox gun, then amen. I'm absolutely up for that. Ain't nothing like a Polish nun. Unstoppable. And that's what I get from you, Magda, today, this sense of energy and drive. And you guys are flying the flags in unexpected ways for Poland. So I also join you in saying what Magda just said a little bit earlier, which is you can also play your part by helping this fantastic organization. I know what I'm about to do.
Read about what we do. Ask questions. We answer your questions because we want you to be involved and donate whatever you can. You will make a difference with us. Thank you in advance.
Oh, but it's just so good. So, Magda, can I share that little thing you told me about Latin, which just really moved me earlier before our call? Can we talk about that for a second?
Sure.
So you studied Latin. That was your
my first major. Yeah, it was my first major.
In New York?
In New York, yeah. Hunter College.
Hunter College, baby. Yeah. And you had a call with your dad, who sounds like quite an incredible character, where he recited bits of the Iliad. Was it? What was it again? Sorry, I can't remember.
Yeah, because my dad learned Latin in school when he was a kid, and he always helped me with etymology of all the words in Polish and later in English. So he was a great inspiration. And then I started studying Latin, and we had our weekly conversations, and a lot of them were about Latin. And I started doing Cicero translations, speeches against Catiline. I don't know if you remember.
I remember. I was there.
Yeah. And so I called him, and we started talking about it, and he just started reciting an entire verse from memory. And I said, something is not right, because he had it so many years ago, and he recited with perfect intonation and accentation. And I had it a couple of days ago, and I don't remember it as well. So I said, no, I'm not going to be a great classic scholar. Let's
Student with a short-term memory. Now, who ever heard of that? There's something profound struck me about that, though, which is sometimes life can defeat you, but it actually pushes you in another direction. And none of us know where we would be, could have been, should have been, if we hadn't have gone the way we did. And even if we're having a hard time today, even if actually we don't feel like we've got a huge amount of money in our pocket, we should also be aware that if it wasn't for chance or luck or whatever you want to call it, happenstance, we might be somewhere else where our only choice was to rely on somebody else's support. And indeed, that's what Polish Humanitarian Action is all about, which is helping those people who, through chance, aren't able to help themselves, and changing lives, changing young children's lives. And Oh, for some reason that really moved me when we had that conversation before. I wanted to share that, Magda. I'm an emotional git, so that's probably why. We've been talking now for half an hour about the amazing work you do. Can you just give us some the link to your website, please, so we can share that?
Sure. www.pah.org.pl. We have a Polish and English version, and as I said, we are on Facebook, Polish and English, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and on Instagram. So please follow us. Again, as I said before, we tell stories, we show videos, we show pictures, we ask you questions. We want to talk to you because it's all of us doing good together. It's all of us helping together. So yeah, let's stay connected. Let's be together.
I like you, Magda, and we'll be following you guys. And you sound a little bit like the First News because, ladies and gentlemen, we have over 80 fascinating calls with fascinating people like Magda and her team of passionate people around the world helping people in less fortunate circumstances. We have interviews with authors, experts, historians, thinkers, beekeepers, sports people, artists, singers, painters, you name it. We are talking to interesting people living interesting lives. That is indeed the impossible mission at the heart of Poland, to go in deep and find out what makes this country tick. Magda, I'm going to end with a quick fire round, if you don't mind. Favorite place in Poland?
By the Oder River, running track that I run every night. It's memories of childhood, incredible microclimate, the smell of June combined together. So yeah, for now.
Wrocław is such an underappreciated city. I think people talk about Krakow and it's like, go to Wrocław, man. I mean, I don't want to offend anyone in Krakow, obviously. Okay, if you had to be...
that.
Oh yeah, I tried to put you in at the start, but you wouldn't. You were resisting too well. If you were stuck in a room, let's say a prison cell, with any other Polish person, dead or alive, who would you pick?
I am going to say, oh God, I have so many names coming to. Okay, I would say Cyprian Norwid. He's one of the most famous romantic poets, but considered number 3 after Mickiewicz. And I have some questions for him. Yeah, we can have a nice chat, I think.
That's a good pick, man. I've heard some vague answers, some evasive answers, some weird answers, but I have to say that was a meritorious. That was a good answer. Not meritorious. Okay, what one place in Poland have you not been that you really should have been?
Bieszczady. Mountains in southeastern country. Very far away from where I lived in Wrocław or in Warsaw or far from New York, but I've seen pictures. It's completely wild, incredible, beautiful, very different. So yeah, I think time to go.
Absolutely. No excuses now. Well, other than the fact you can't travel. Describe Poland in one word.
In one word, unforgettable.
Nice. Why'd you say that?
It just stays with you. I mean, I came back here after many years abroad, and never for a moment did I think that I could not do that. So yeah, unforgettable. It stays with you.
Oh, well, I think that's an excellent way to end. Ladies and gentlemen, please do share this episode with anyone you think might be interested in the story of Magda and the team at Polish Humanitarian Action. Go and check them out, just like you said, on pah.org.pl. And also make sure that you look at the other fascinating conversations we have on the First News channel. Thefirstnews.com, in my humble, honest, and I think fairly impartial opinion, is the best single English language platform. If you are looking for in-depth reporting on the country of Poland, the state of Poland, the future of Poland, the business of Poland, the economy of Poland, the culture of Poland, then I can think of no better thing to do than to click on www.firstnews.com and check out Heart of Poland. So I'll see you again for another episode of the fantastic, wonderful, magical Heart of Poland.